And guys, welcome back to another PDOCS live stream. And this week is the week where we have an expert guest speaker. And if you're watching, you can probably see on the screen, we got a couple of people on here now. And this week we're having on a guest, as I mentioned, covering a pretty interesting topic to me, because it's something I haven't really refined much over the years, and it's something I don't really teach on. So I think it's interesting to get somebody that's just an expert at this. And in addition, another perspective for somebody that like really just spends time building and setting up course curriculum and most particularly profitable courses that actually sell in the market and get results for clients. So that's kind of Kate's expertise. I'm going to let her introduce herself and a little about her background.
Thanks, Ray. I have been an instructional designer is the technical term, but I don't use it very often because people go, huh? Are you an interior designer? No, I'm not a graphic designer. I'm not an interior designer. I actually take concepts and learning and I figure out how to put it together as a course or training. Leadership development. I started back in 2002. I worked for Radio Shack as a store manager and I got promoted to their training department. And I really loved it. We did 2 video trainings every month back in the day when it was a satellite broadcast because we didn't have internet.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we had internet, but we didn't have internet in the stores and that sort of thing. So it wasn't quite the same. And then I went from working for Radio Shack, which doesn't exist anymore, very sadly, and I worked for a very large employer here in the Southeast for many years. And then I decided I really wanted to work on my own because I am kind of a little bit of a rebel. So in a corporate environment, you feel like you're masking a lot. But I have literally, I don't exactly know how many courses I've created. I know it's close to 1,000, if not that, because it's been 22 years and I create multiple, probably somewhere between 30 to 50 courses and trainings every year for a very long time. So
yeah, that's a pretty good number. That's more than I even thought. We never got into the number. I never asked you how many you've created. What if can you elaborate a little more specifically, since you've kind of been working with for yourself, how that's gone? What are some of your main projects? Maybe how many courses you've done in that time period?
yeah, a lot. But let me just say, one of the biggest challenges I had is going from training into online courses. And this is a big change for anybody who's coming from education or corporate, is that online courses are different than academic and they're different from corporate training. And they're different in, like, our brains are still the same. That's our brains still learn them.
Yeah.
But the biggest difference really has to do with how things are evaluated and where you get your audiences. You realize with academics and with corporate, you never have to get an audience. Like, all the marketing is kind of internal marketing, or you have to sell a corporate VP on the idea of doing a particular type of course, or unsell them because they want to fix everything with training.
Yeah, right.
So that happens a lot. And then so there's sales that happen, but not necessarily to the end user. So that's a really big difference. The other, like I said, is evaluation. So I don't know if you're familiar with the levels of evaluation, but they have to do with, well, there's 4 levels according to Kirkpatrick. There's 5 according to Phillips. I added a 6th. So level 0, which I added, is kind of like, did they even do the training? Level 1 is, did they like it? Level 2 is, did they understand it? Level 3 is, did they do it? Level 4, did they get the result they wanted? And level 5 is return on investment. So those really change because in the corporate environment, they really want to know whether people did it or passed a test. In the academics, they really want to know if they passed the test. But who you're trying to prove that it worked changes. It's not the teacher. It's not the school board. It's not the bosses. It's the person who takes the course, which is very, very different.
That's a good point. Yeah. I think that's overlooked. And I know we're going to get a little deeper into the phases, the levels of the evaluation stuff when you kind of dive into your lesson. But that's a great point. I think a lot of people, especially if they've come from the corporate world and they want to start, creating their own education or courses or what have you, I think they do it very similar to like corporate trainings, right? And in terms of structure, because it's probably what they know. And that's what they took their whole lives or their professional careers at least. So that's interesting. I never really thought of it that way. Yeah, before we go into like the lesson aspect, are there been, so in the last couple of years, again, while you've been working for yourself, do you have kind of a certain specific niche and industry you work with and help create curriculum, or is it very wide ranging?
It's very wide ranging. Like, and that really started with the corporate environment, because I do anything from teaching people how to read a P&L, how to do customer service, how to manage people, a lot of leadership development, how to make a sandwich. I did that too. So, a lot of bakery type stuff, how to bake stuff, how to cook stuff, a lot of safety training. I have done so much safety training. So, I mean, it just runs the gamut. In almost everything, it really comes down to wanting somebody to be able to do something, not just know how to do it, because I've done tons of safety training where people know how they're supposed to do it, but they don't necessarily do it. Kind of like, I think and you're capable of when you go in your car and you drive, I think you're capable of doing the speed limit, right? I mean, that's not like
Yeah,
you need training on how to do the speed limit, but most people don't really do the speed limit. So we have to deal with what are the barriers, what are preventing people from doing what they know they ought to do.
gotcha. Yep, that makes sense. What about more in the information and knowledge space? Because I think that's what's going to be most applicable to our audience, being experts, coaches, freelancers, agencies. So like, I think a lot of I mean, let's just kind of dive right into it, and then feel free to screen share if you have anything that you want to, or that goes, with what your topics or what you're going to talk about. But let's dive right into, if I'm an expert at lead generation per se, whatever. Let's take a basic one that a lot of people do nowadays, and I want to create a course showing a business owner or another expert how to generate leads. Where do
Mhm.
I start when I'm putting together my curriculum? Like, where do I even start?
Okay, let me go ahead and go through my presentation because I think that's going to be answered in that. And then
Excellent. Yeah, please do.
and then I don't also answer it there. So let's
Yeah,
be,
you should have access to share just whenever you got it. Take your time, no rush. But yeah, that'd be awesome.
you see it now?
Yep. Build a quality course with Overwhelm.
Okay, yeah, just a title slide. So I had it left over from another thing. But I do think that courses are really good for sharing expertise, changing lives, and making a difference. And that can be even with like, lead gen type stuff. So make a difference, by the way. I have a whole slide on this because this, when I talk to people, is probably the most important thing people say they want to do as a result of having a course. They want to have a course because they want to make a difference. I think that's really beautiful.
I think that's good because I also tell people that kind of overlook that, and unfortunately that is kind of their goal, but they started to, I want to make a course to make money, right? And I think you
Right.
got to look at it more from, if your course makes a difference as a byproduct, it's going to make money, right?
Yeah, integrity is really important to me. I don't want to just make a course to make money. I'm all okay with making money. That's not a problem for me. But I do want to know that when I'm making money, it's because there's a difference being made too.
Totally.
So this is one of the problems we have with courses is not just teaching them how to do lead gen or how to do stuff. I mean, lead gen's another one too, because you generate a lot of leads by being visible. And what you'll find is that people, you tell them something very strategic, very logical. You do step 1, 2, 3, 4, and then they don't do it. So why do they not do it?
Yeah.
Sometimes we feel like there's this resistance to doing something. How do you make people want to do what's in their best interest? I think it's really possible to engineer a transformative experience so that people are doing things that they haven't done before, things that were hard. I've done it before. I've changed the culture, and I've made people like behave differently. It was quite radical. It's quite amazing. So I've taken a lot of that experience over the last, really happened in 2015 that I made a really big difference. And I've just taken everything that I learned from that experience and it's really transformed the way I create courses too.
That's awesome.
So what do you want your audience to do, think, or feel as a result of your course? You can break this down by lesson too. Like you have this big outcome, like what you want them to do, think, and feel, but you also, for each lesson, what do you want them as a stepping stone to get to that major result? That's the word, as a
Yep.
result of the course. So I put together like 4 different topics that really help you get to that. The first is really the right topic. And I think a lot of people overlook this. They'll say something like they want to do lead gen, but lead gen is not necessarily a wrong topic, but is it precise enough? Like what is the precision on it? And we talk a lot about niching, and I want to talk about like not just niching, but scoping.
Mm,
So scope, like if you're looking at a very narrow type of course versus a wider course, because you pick this idea, and if it's a narrow idea, you're going to have to fulfill a lot of work to make that idea happen. If you are not thinking about scoping that idea from the beginning, then what you end with is a much larger bulk of work that needs to be done. The project is much bigger, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, it does.
So I talk about niched versus niched and scoped because in my mind, and I didn't come from market, I mentioned that. In my mind, niching usually has to do with your market, like who is the person that you're trying to reach or who is your ideal avatar or that sort of thing. But I feel like scoping is what is the project size? Like, what are you trying to accomplish with your course? So I give 3 examples here of where a course topic may be niched, and then the next one where it's niched and scoped. So you can see, like, if you're going to do wellness for busy professionals, you can scope this down pretty far, but it's still much larger as a project. Where if you say daily stress relief for managers, now it's like far more scoped. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. It's more direct and kind of clear and concise in terms of what the expectations would be. One's so broad.
Yeah. The same with like this financial foundations for college kids or 20-year-olds, building strong credit for first-time home buyers. That course, like when you go to build a course and you think financial foundation, what's all the things they need to know? And that can feel very overwhelming. But if you're saying, I want the people who go through this to be, 20 or 25 years old, and I want them to build strong credit so they can buy their first time home, that is so less overwhelming when you're thinking about that together. And then the last one I have is like marketing strategies for small business success, and then email marketing for boutique retailers. Same kind of audience, but one's scoped and one is not.
Yeah, no, that makes a big difference. I've never really viewed it quite that way. But I do it more scoped. I just never really knew it in that nomenclature.
Yeah, yeah. I picked up that nomenclature because as an instructional designer, I'm always the project manager as well. It's kind of talking about project scope, and then you talk about things being out of scope. So it's really a project management term, but I think it's really important with course topic.
No, I would fully agree. I've used it more in the terms of like in proposals and scope of work expected, but very
Yep,
similar to like you're saying, more in a project management.
exactly.
Yeah.
But when you have the right topic, so you got one that's niched and scoped and profitable, and it's exactly what you want, the project's more manageable. When you go to iterate your course and you're trying it out, you're not iterating 25 modules, you're iterating 5, so you can actually iterate and test a lot faster. You can have more specific marketing. I'm not a marketer, but I think that you would agree with that. It's increased applicability. That means everything you create is more applicable to every person who opts in, instead of trying to do a broad one where some people like these 3 and some people like those 3, but everything is really important for everybody who opts in. And
Yeah.
then you want stronger learner outcomes. So,
Which is important. Like you said, one of the big things is like, why does somebody pay the money for a course and then never get into module 1, even never mind finish the course, but not even start it really?
yeah.
And a lot of that is, you're not setting it up properly to, again, stronger learner outcomes. Just that says it all, right? Because I don't think enough people really focus on that aspect if they're building it.
Yeah, that's really important for me. I headed up the team we had on evaluations. I did a lot of deep dives into how things are evaluated in the different levels of evaluation, which I mentioned earlier. So,
Real quick, what are your thoughts on the thought process of pre-selling a course and building it with an audience and having them give you live feedback as opposed to always pre-building the content and then selling it and see if it works? Do you have a thought on that? Is that something that comes up much?
yeah, I totally agree. I think that I think the iteration process is the time for you to experiment on a live audience. You should be experimenting with concepts that you're very familiar with. It should be scoped and you have the right topic to begin with. You should be making promises that you can fulfill, maybe not with evergreen type content and prepared lessons, but at least live one-to-one. So yeah, I think you should be testing it with a live group. That's what I teach.
Awesome. That's how I've had the most success in my courses that have done the best were ones I pre-sold the idea. People all raised their hand and said, okay, I'll charge an entry-level price and let's build it with a live audience, right? And
Yeah.
those have been my better ones. There's some I've built in advance and thought, oh, this is going to be awesome. And I got crickets when I went to launch it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't agree with creating a course in a silo like you and ChatGPT creating this awesome course and no one's seen it. I feel like that is a recipe for a lot of wasted time.
Yep, I would agree. Okay, excellent.
Okay, so second is the right problem. I saw some of your stuff on your PDOCS and I was like, oh, we agree on this one. Like, what is the right problem we're to solve? So I think this is really one of the things that I'm going to give you. This is my secret. This is a little of my secret. I have a lot of secret sauce, but this is a little bit of my secret sauce. So when you talk to most instructional designers, people who are familiar with learning and stuff like that, they'll come up with this list, which you may have seen before. This is Bloom's. This
Looks
is
familiar.
revised Bloom's. These are levels of objectives, and they're these cognitive objectives. And like the lowest level is where people can recall what you said, then they can understand it, like maybe they can comprehend it, repeat it to you, they can apply it, they can analyze it, they can decide, differentiate between what's good and what's bad, and then they can create it on their own. So this is Bloom's level, kind of like you use these to kind of determine like what level of evaluation you want to do eventually and how deep, I guess, the learning. We say deep, but the triangle goes up, so that's kind of a weird kind of mixed metaphor. But
Yeah,
how
and this
high?
with this image, yes.
Yeah. Well, most times when this image is shown, it is almost always shown as a pyramid.
True.
But
But
what
if we were going down a rabbit hole, you could say deep.
Yeah, that's true. If you're going down a rabbit hole. What's interesting is that this is from Benjamin Bloom. He created this. He has 3 domains, though, and this is just the cognitive domain. This is the domain that most people use because it is very easy to measure. But it isn't everything, and it's not the most important thing in a lot of cases. So in addition to the cognitive domain, he also has what's called an affective domain, which has to do with feelings. There's another one that's psychomotor. So if you're doing something that has to do with sports, or if you have something to do with dance or art or something like that, the muscle memory is basically included, you would want to look at the the other one. But for most of the stuff that we create needs to have a mix of both cognitive and the affective, the thinking and the feeling. And so we're not just looking at remember, understand, apply, analyze, create. We're also looking at receiving new information, responding to it, valuing things that we may not have valued before, organizing our life around these new values, and then getting to the point where we embody them. This, of course, is the least. This is the most, or the deepest, like I said.
Yeah.
So you may not need your group to go all the way to embodying new values or embodying new things, but there may be a part of this feeling that needs to be addressed because it's often a feeling about something that keeps people or prevents people from actually seeing progress.
Yeah.
Sense to you?
Yeah, it does make sense.
Okay.
As long as there's clarity with it as well, right? I think a lot of people get confused when they open up certain courses and curriculum because there's no clarity and they get overwhelmed right off the bat. They're like, oh my God, 18 modules. And you know what I mean?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. There needs to be clarity. This is really kind of behind the scenes. This is what you're thinking as a designer as you're designing your course.
Yeah.
And like I said, with that lead magnet, you might say, hey, listen, they just need to follow these steps, do exactly this, and then they're good as gold. But you have those people who are resisting particular steps. So it's really important for you to say, if they're not posting 3 times a day or whatever it is that you want them to do, I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah, no, that's a good example.
What is causing the resistance? Like, what is causing them to try and maybe push back on this? What is going on in their head? And this is where the feeling might be very helpful for you to think about ahead of time to anticipate those responses.
So the last thing I want to say and elaborate on here for anybody maybe watching, I think personally, when I've tried to create curriculum and courses and stuff in the past, I've focused more on the thinking side and not so much on the feeling side of the user or the person consuming the course. So I think that is kind of important to realize because I hear about the feeling that people have when they come back and give me feedback, but I didn't really think about it, going in. And then you need to be receptive to that feedback, whether good, bad. Otherwise, you need to be indifferent and go optimize or reiterate accordingly. But I think that's important to kind of think, what are they feeling? And again, the top one, are they totally embodying everything? And I think that's where they have full confidence that they've mastered it. And now they could go, A, get results, but probably reteach it to other people. They're now at the top of the spectrum.
Yeah. And I mean, of course, you don't have to actually teach them to feel this. This could be saying, like, I know that one reason that a person might refrain from posting 3 times a day is that they feel like maybe they're bothering everybody. So it might be when you're reading that lesson, you're thinking they're going to think that maybe they're bothering everybody. So maybe I need to include a story that says, hey, when I first started posting, I was afraid I was bothering everybody. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to tell them they need to change the way they feel. It could be you modeling that change. It really depends on what the resistance is, how deep that resistance is, whether or not you can get somebody who you know in your group to kind of open up and share some of what they're feeling, be really open. I really feel like this is part of loving your learners, and I really believe we need to love the people who come in our program.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And no, I agree with you. Maybe I said that wrong. I totally agree with you. I don't want to teach them how to feel. And I want to position it in a way so they achieve that feeling, right?
Right.
So I just want to be thinking about that cognitively when I'm creating the course, the curriculum, etc.
Yep.
Got it.
Okay, so the next is the right journey, and this is where we're actually talking about the outline. I think an outline is like probably the most important document you're going to have before you create your course, and this is where you're thinking about every single module. And then I put this up here as like an example of a bad course map, because you don't know where it's going. This is somebody who's trying to be cute with titles. And you'll see this a lot of times. People are trying to be really clever with their title, or they're trying to be clever in their stuff. I don't know where that comes from. I think sometimes people want to show that it stands out, it's differentiated, they're funny, they're humor, or whatever like that. But if it's not clear, if you open up this, you want to learn about tea, and this is what you get, it looks overwhelming. Am I right?
Yeah, well, you're 100% right. We were just talking about this with a recent live stream guest a month or so ago. Clear over clever always with your messaging. You're better off. I think the clever is coming a lot more from the so-called marketers or the people that, like you said, are trying to stand out. But like, that's not really what they're tea experts or whatever, right? In this case, they're not marketers. So go do what you're good at, basically.
Yeah. And by the way, I love clever. It just can't be at the cost of clear.
Exactly. Clear over clever. Not to say clever is not as well, but one has to precede the other.
Absolutely. I agree. So this is just an example of what a focused course map can look like. It's all the same topics as what you saw, except that it's organized in a way, and it's like, okay, I know exactly what I'm doing. This actually looks doable. I don't know if you had thought about doing a course on tea. I've never created a course on tea. I like tea. That's why I used it as an example. But does that seem like a far more interesting kind of layout?
Definitely does. It's much more appealing to the eyes. And again, right, what you're trying to do with this also is, regardless, there's always human psychology working, right? So the ease of on the eyes and the first feeling they get is an overwhelm. Whereas the last one, I didn't even get through it all before you switch slides. And I don't think I would have, right? Because it was just like too jumbled and too much. So also, I kind of want to get your take. And I think this kind of ties in with this, and it can go a different route as well. But I kind of think less is more in courses, meaning I think a lot of times we'll try to make so much curriculum and so many modules that they do it at the expense of the actual value of the information being delivered, right? Does that make sense?
Totally, totally. And that's why I was talking about that scoping. When you have that scoped, it's really important. I do want to make a quick comment that is not in the slide, and it is not like I wasn't really planning on it. But when we think about, quicker is more important. Now, a lot of people believe that micro learning is better than like a regular length. So, for instance, a 4-minute lesson is better than a 40-minute lesson. I want to say that is not necessarily true. The reason that people come up with shorter lessons is because of attention spans, and people don't like to be bored.
Correct.
A 40-minute lesson that gives them exactly what they want and is capturing their attention is better than a boring 4-minute lesson.
Of course, yeah, there's pros and cons to both, but you don't sacrifice the content, because just to try to make it longer or shorter.
Yeah, there is no right course length. Like, they've done a lot of studies. There's no right length for a thing. People feel like most of the good lessons have exactly what's necessary in it and nothing more, nothing extra. And they take the right amount of time to explain it. So it's, it doesn't need further elaboration. It doesn't need further condensing. It is just the right size. What the right size really depends on how big that objective is, like what is the thing you're trying to get them to do, and what does it take to get them there? I would say just don't be boring when you do it.
Totally. I would agree. Yeah, continue. This is pretty interesting.
As somebody who's not a very interesting person, that's really good advice for me too. So this is just another example of a focus course map. It's,
Yep.
it's a
Financial.
design, and I just wanted to give a couple examples. You can see what each person is doing. Putting together your course map, there is something that's really important. Like each one of these is a lesson. So 5 is paying down debt. The thing is if you're teaching a lesson on paying down debt, you want to come up with points that are applicable to a particular person. So you're thinking, what do they already know and not know? So you could teach them that cognitive part that's missing. What do they already know how to do and why are they not doing it? So you're dealing with those affective measures. And then have a very clear call to action in every single lesson. There should be some action that they're doing as a result of that lesson. So with paying down debt, it might be too much of a step to say, okay, go, and now that you finished this lesson, go pay down all your debt. But
Right.
it could be a plan for paying down your debt in whatever that length of time is. So there needs to be a step at the end of every single lesson.
Good point.
So this is an infographic that, or a picture that just shows like what a lot of course maps look like that I've seen,
Yeah.
and kind of what we're looking for.
Hmm.
And last is the right result, and that is kind of what action, thought, or feeling will create the measurable results for your audience, and that is the action that you want at the end of every lesson, so that they're leading to the actionable result at the end of the course. But what really matters here, like I said, is success is defined by your audience's perception. That's super key. It's not necessarily even based on fact. For instance, somebody might say,
True.
I want to get this course that teaches my baby to sleep all night because my baby has got colic and it cries all night long. And that course might teach some strategies for getting your baby to sleep at night, but it also might teach you strategies or some knowledge or deal with the feelings of your baby crying all night long. So the course might not actually result in the baby stopping crying at night. It might end with your anxiety about that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, and that is true. I mean, that's phrased in a way that I may not have seen it phrased before, but I totally agree with that.
Yeah. And
Doesn't
then
really matter if I agree with it; it's objectively true.
it's objectively true. So one of the things that I feel is key and not being used very much. And by the way, I'm not a fan of assessments in courses. So you go and you do a section, you take a test. It's like, what does that tell you? Like,
Yeah.
unless it's for certification, there are some times when it's appropriate. But what I do love is self-assessment. And this really has to do with having the students score themselves. And what this feels like is like you're leaning over their shoulder and giving them feedback. So this is an example of this. I created this one about looking at your online course. Like, does it meet these 19 standards? So this is standard number 10 that says courses have the standard is that a course has an optimal balance of tell and discovery. So you're telling them some things and then you're having to discover other things. These are usually things where there's more resistance to them accepting it. So it gives them the criteria to score themselves. It also helps them see how they could score better. So you could have a lesson on what it means to have tell and discovery, and then give them an assessment on going and looking at what they have and how well are they doing it. I think this is like one of the best ways to make progress visible, obvious to your clients, the students,
Yep.
and help people see that they're getting the results. And we talked, and I just wanted to talk really briefly about ROI. And I'm going back to scope. Scope matters for ROI because when you have a nice, narrow, scoped course project, you're going to have fewer hours invested in it, and you're going to have better marketing. When you go for something with a broader scope, you are going to have so many, and these are just numbers made up, you're going to have so many hours that you have to put in to develop every single one of those modules. There's so much that goes into it. Most people underestimate how much work it takes to put the course together. So when you're putting your ROI together on your course, how much time did you put into it? How much effort did you put into it? How much money did you spend on maybe video editing or anything else? You're going to put a lot more into a course that's scoped broader.
100%. Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
So I see only a couple of people on live right now. I know more are probably going to be watching the replay in the Facebook Live or on YouTube. Isaac or Scott, if you have any questions or you'd like to go, just put a 1 down in the chat, and I will call on you here in a minute. but I had a couple takeaways, and what I always tell people, and this is going to be very redundant for anybody that's been on a lot of these or watched, but every time when I have a guest speaker on or I'm teaching a like whatever, I like you to at least take away one thing that you could go implement and change right away, if not more, but like always one thing at minimum. My one thing is I realize that I've never implemented those self-assessments and never really thought about it. So that's something I might go implement and go back and tweak. And I already made a note to go look at it. So if I'm going to look at it, I'm going to make an action point from there and evaluate if it makes sense or not. But that was my immediate takeaway. And one other question I had, my hydraulic just went down in my chair. Oh, I stepped on the, yeah, one other question that or something we kind of covered that I think is interesting. I'd just like a quick little recap before I go to any other questions is, use whatever verbiage you want, but you kind of talked about like the macro and the micro or the big picture and the small component within courses. So like people want that outcome from module 1 to module 10, but they have trouble kind of seeing the small steps to get there and building those 10 steps out in a structured way, which is really what we covered in a lot of different ways today. But within one quick kind of summation, what would you say to people in terms of like trying to get the end result of a course and then trying to kind of figure out how to reverse engineer that and put together the modules to get to that step? Is there just a quick summation or advice you would have for that?
Yes, I do. Now that we have AI tools, I have before in the day, I used to take every single point and then that was important. Any sort of outcome that I felt was important or an action that a person needed to take or a feeling I needed to take, and I would put post-its and I would move them all around until I had the right thing. Now I
Yep.
do a massive data dump into ChatGPT, and then I dump the whole thing in there and I ask it to create an outline for me. And then I will sit there and I will adjust the outline because I'm the expert. As I'm going through there, I'm saying, does this make sense? Another tip that I use because some things are super easy, like creating a cup of coffee, there's a nice sequential order based on like a chronological order makes it super easy. But there's other things where it might be introduction to English literature. It feels like there's all these different things. Do I put Shakespeare first or, this other type of person first? It can feel very like arbitrary. What I do with that is I walk through it in my brain and I think about how I can transition from one to the next. And if it
Yep.
feels like a logical transition, then I'll go with it because it's got a sort of sense of flow to it. If it feels like a really hard transition, I'll see if I can modify the flow so that it has a better flow to it. So does that make sense?
Yeah, almost like there's some disconnect between next steps. And if you have that, you're going to get more resistance and less people that actually go, yeah, it makes 100% sense.
Yeah.
That's a great way to answer. Um, Scott, thank you for the comments there. We're gonna talk about one more thing in a minute, but Isaac, you had a question. Could you unmute and ask quickly before I kind of go through the last thing? Kate has, I think, a special little bonus for anybody watching or anybody that might be seeing this in the replay. So I'll cover that in a minute, but go ahead, Isaac.
Yeah, sure, cool. My question was just simply this. Thank you for great content. I think one thing I've taken away from this is the need to, in a way, niche down. Like you said, I thought how you had the headings ironed out was pretty good rather than being broad. I thought that's one great key takeaway. Question I had was, what are the mistakes to avoid? Yeah, in my case, for example, I've done lots of different courses, mainly around financial trading, investing, etc., with some, mixed results, right? And so I've kind of approached things more from a sort of product quality point of view, saying that I want to put the best thing that's out there. But I'm thinking, what are the steps to do? So, for example, how, let's say researching first or researching with niche. Let's say you've got a great product, but you're not sure what the take up is going to be. What are the simple practical steps to take and mistakes to avoid so we don't go through this cycle of creating product that people may not want, but you might personally think is great, if that makes sense? Yeah.
Yeah. I think we talked a little bit about iterating the product. And that is like you want to put together, it probably takes you less than a week to really do the initiation for a good course. You could probably do it in a couple of days. And I'm talking about like making a good outline, figuring out who your people are. If you work on it really hard, you could get it done within a week. I did it this weekend for a course I knew nothing about. I did a 90-minute call with somebody and I spent about 4 hours mapping out her course, and we had a really, really good outline at the end of that. You can move forward with that outline alone. All you need to do is to get somebody in your live launch program and figure it out as you go through. And that's where you're going to iterate. And as you're iterating, you're going to want your measurements nailed down before you start. Like, what are you going to measure? How are you successful? And when I say successful, how is your client successful? Of course, is successful when they're successful. And then thinking about like where there may be a disconnect between what you said and what they got, the activities that are necessary to do that, using that live launch group for a lot of feedback. And go back to your outline, go back to your lesson plans, and change those lesson plans and your outlines based on the feedback you get with real clients.
Excellent. I think one final point I'd say that,
Isaac, really
yeah, sure.
quickly. One
Go
thing
ahead,
I would
yeah.
add to that is I think it's important to also really understand, like you said something important there, I think. I just want to point out for anyone else watching, like a product that I think is great and I know is valuable, the market doesn't quite receive. So when it comes to that, it's also knowing the sophistication level of your audience. Are they at the same level as you? If not, how are we bringing them up to that level slowly and gradually so they maybe do grasp it and are able to implement? So we need to make the course curriculum to the sophistication level of our audience, not us being the expert. And that's the thing. And by the end, they should be at a much more level. I'm not going to say they're going to be as great a person, but they'll be at a much more level sophistication level in terms of that topic of content, whatever it is. In your case, financial trading and what have you. So I'm guessing a majority of the people you're either showing the content to or trying to take through there aren't at your sophistication level, and that might be the gap right there. Maybe when you're starting off, you're making it for you, not somebody that was you 5 steps ago. Do you understand what I'm saying?
That makes sense. I think what
Something
you
to
said,
think about it, please.
yeah. Well, I think the point you also made about multiple things they can take from it. So, for example, someone may not take the immediate, may not get the immediate results you want them to get, but they can get an additional benefit in the case of the child having what's it called, the byproduct. You know, there's some byproducts. You know what I mean? I thought that was pretty good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point too. And also what I think she means by what they take from it is, I know from consuming courses, I think everybody on this call has bought courses. I know I've invested enough money in courses and programs. And what I do as a business owner, usually when I'm buying courses, it's something to do with business, whatever, something to do with business growth or ROI. But what I've found is there's courses that I've paid and I've gone through all the curriculum, and only about 20% was applicable to me, my business, that vibe. So I use that 20%, the other 80%. So that's also, everybody's going to have their own takeaways, right? I don't just follow every course blindly. Now, some are made that way, right? If it's step-by-step baking, that's different. But if somebody's giving you their opinion and their strategy, and Kate brought up earlier, which I could say with a few different things, there's a lot of things. There's 10 ways you can skin a sheep or whatever the hell the phrase is, right? Like sales, there's no wrong way. There's multiple different ways, but whatever gets the sale at the end, like I can teach multiple different methods. I've been through, there's no right or wrong way to sell, but there are preferred ways. There are things that jive with me. There are things that are like, oh, I would never say that phrase. I wouldn't take that and use it in my business. So same with courses, what you give to people, as long as they can have their takeaway from each lesson, doesn't have to be all the information, but that one thing that gets them to the next level, and then ultimately to the next module as well.
Yeah, I really like what you said. I think a lot of people are teaching rules or copy and paste type things rather than principles, the underlying reasons why something works. And so it really makes it hard to take somebody else's exact steps and work it for yourself. But if they taught you the principles, you could modify it a lot better. Does that make sense?
It does. And just in closing here, and then I'll get to Kate, free gift, and we'll make sure you guys get access to that. So Isaac, thank you for the question. And again, I'm going to message you with some information I talked about earlier. Scott had mentioned here, I wish I had a great question. This was amazingly tight little presentation and shed a lot of light into the process. And he says, in the middle of making one right now, meaning a course. So he said he took away the self-assessment, the course map, and the whole cognitive feeling motor distinction, which were great takeaways. So that's also Scott and Isaac, you have and probably will be building more courses around what you had said. So Kate, what did you say you had for people that are either in the process or want to build a course, something that would be a valuable tool? So the guys watching live, we can drop it in the chat, and Kate, you also send it to me. And wherever this is shown in the replay, YouTube, Facebook, it'll be in the comments of the description.
Yeah, I have two things, and I know that's like breaking a marketing rule because you're supposed to have one call to action, right? So depends on
You're
what
not a marketer.
I'm a marketer, so I can break all the rules.
There
It's
you
fine.
go.
So one of the things I have is I have the 19 standards for your course. So if you have a course already, you can look at it and see how well you score. It's what I use when I do an audit, and it's very similar, like me looking over your shoulder and saying, oh, maybe not so much.
Yep.
And then the
That's
other
cool.
thing I have is I just created it last week for another event, and it's 3 signs that the course you're planning to create is too big and what to do about it. It's got a super long title, but it's only a 4-page freebie that shows you like some signs that a course might be too big. And we talked a little bit today about why that can be such a very difficult thing.
Cool. Well, if you have those here handy right now, you could go throw them in the chat, and Isaac and Scott can either copy and paste or click on it and open it right up. Otherwise, if you don't have it handy or you can't, you can just send it to me in our messenger thread. I'll make sure I get it to Scott and Isaac, and I'll go post it in the description and such.
Yeah, I'm sorry I don't have the link, so I'll give it to you.
Okay, guys. Scott, DM me if you want either or both of those resources, and I'll make sure I get them over to you. Isaac, I'll include them in the information I'm going to be sending you here a little bit after the call here. Kate, thanks again for coming on. I truly appreciate it. I thought it was a great presentation. Hopefully, I picked up something. Hopefully, I was able to ask some questions and make it pretty good and interactive and challenge you a little bit. And thank you for sharing with the audience.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I really love talking about though.
Awesome. Yeah, it was good. It was an off cue topic for me, which was good. I'm pretty much always talking the same 5 or 6 topics, so I like to expound upon that every once in a while.
All right.
Thanks again, Kate. I will include the resources for anybody watching again in the description or in the comments, and we will see you guys next time. Have a good day, everybody.